I woke up one morning and my orchard was dying. No warning, no note, just this hollow, aching quiet where there should have been the steady music of drip lines and rustling leaves and that low, soft hum that meant everything out there was still alive. It was the kind of silence you don't forget, the kind that settles in your bones before your brain's caught up. I knew, even before I shoved my boots on and made it out to the first row, that something was wrong, really wrong. The ground was brittle under my feet, the soil pale and gray, my trees slumping in the heat like they'd aged a decade overnight. That's what 5 acres of apples, peaches, and pears looks like when you wake up to find the life choked right out of them. Not thirsty, not wilted, dead dry. And I guess that's the part that always stuck with me. How it only takes one night, one decision made by someone who's never gotten their hands dirty, to try and erase everything you've built. My late husband, Mark, planted those trees before cancer hollowed him out and took him away from us. I kept them going, partly because I needed the money, but mostly because it was the last way I could still feel him, just to be out there, hands in the dirt he loved. So you want a hook? Here's your hook. The HOA, those clipboard-wielding, power-drunk neighbors who always seemed to have a new rule or a new fine, decided overnight that my orchard was no longer in line with their vision for the community. You know what I mean? They shut off my water. No notice. Just a bright orange tag zip-tied to the shutoff. Temporary service halt. Hua Comlian Zivu. Signed, Linda, Queen of the Petty Tyrants, President of the Board, lover of pearl earrings and words like aesthetic. It hit me like a punch in the chest. My first thought was rage, the pure, white-hot kind that makes your hands shake, not because you're scared, but because you know you can't just let it go this time. This was about more than irrigation. It was about Mark's memory, about my kids' college money, about the one thing left that still felt like it belonged to me. I tore that stupid tag free, jammed it in my pocket for evidence, and stared at the lock valve. Zero pressure, bone dry. That's when I noticed the footprints, multiple sets pressed deep into the dust by the irrigation line. They didn't just cut my water. They waited, stood there, wanted me to see the damage. I could have screamed, could have cried, but what I did was walk slow and steady, straight to the HOA clubhouse. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bad intentions. Linda was behind her desk, flanked by her 2 loyal lieutenants, Brian and Cheryl. When I asked why the water was off, Linda didn't even flinch. She held up some printed form and said, "Routine compliance inspection," like it was nothing personal, like 5 acres of dying orchard was just paperwork. But I wasn't about to let them get away with it. You know, I'm the only one in this HOA with agricultural water lines, right? You singled out my orchard. I could see the smug little tug at Linda's lipstick. This community was designed for residential aesthetics, she said. Your operation is increasingly incompatible with our evolving neighborhood character. My orchard was here before the HOA, before their first stainless steel grill. I told her as much. She tried to lean on gray areas and board votes and technicalities about where the water lines run. But I knew my rights. I'd spent years working city zoning before Mark got sick. I knew where HOA power ended and mine began. She thought she'd won. I drove past my trees, past the dry creek bed mark, and I once watched with our daughter on his shoulders down to the county office. Cliff, the old clerk, grinned when he saw me. He dug out the original maps, signatures, easement grants, proof that the HOA only had conditional use of the gravel road their whole green harvest market depended on. And I owned the title. I could revoke their access for trespass, sabotage, interference, basically for what they'd just done. I went home with the paperwork, sat on the porch in Mark's rocker as the sun went down, and remembered the day he planted Ellie's tree, wrapping her tiny hand around the sapling, saying, "Treat it right, kid. It'll outlive us both." And it had until now. That night, I promised myself I wasn't letting them take anything else. Next morning, folder in hand, I was back at the county, laying it all out for Marcy and zoning. She didn't even wait for me to finish before calling it what it was, a sledgehammer violation. But I didn't want the hammer yet. I wanted them to feel the handle first. The county records confirmed it. That gravel road was their lifeline. All their delivery trucks, vendors, landscapers used it. Without it, Their market was dead in the water. I called my cousin Daniel, who owed me a favor, and by Friday, there was a heavy steel gate, double-locked, legal signage, and a keypad blocking their only access. The next morning, I parked my old tractor across the entrance for good measure. Let's just say the market didn't open on time, or at all. You want a twist? Here it comes. They try to fight back, of course. Sent me legal threats, cease and desists, accused me of obstructing commerce and endangering the public. I handed it to my attorney, Derek, who smiled for the first time in months, and counterfile for felony utility interference, trespass, and civil conspiracy. Then I started sending evidence to the news, the zoning board, and the mayor's office. Everything from the illegal valve tampering to an old recording Mark had saved Linda's voice on tape, saying they needed to starve out non-conforming properties. By then, neighbors were showing up at my gate with jars of honey and banana bread and handwritten apologies. Even Mrs. Delgado from 4 streets over whispered, "I'm sorry I signed the complaint about your bins." Some of them had just been following orders, never knowing where it would lead. The market? It tanked. Delivery drivers turned around in confusion, vendors canceled, sponsors pulled out. The HOA's emergency newsletter called it a miscommunication. The city planner himself called me for the real story. Even Cheryl, hands shaking, admitted at a packed community meeting that she'd helped turn the valve and had no idea it would go this far. The room erupted. Calls for new elections, Linda's resignation, a new ballot measure to permanently protect agricultural parcels. I stayed quiet in the back. I didn't need to say a word. 3 days later, a new letter arrived. Full restoration of water, a public apology, and a request for road access. 6 signatures, only 1 against. Guess who? That evening, I opened the gate as the sun went down, let the heavy steel swing wide, and watched the orchard breathe again. Then I typed one last note. Remember this feeling the moment you realized you do not own the dirt you walk on. You never did. The next morning, the sprinklers came back to life. Click, click, hiss. Water hitting thirsty leaves, soaking into the roots. I walked the rows, pressed my hand to the trunk of Ellie's tree, and whispered, "We're still here, kid." Not every tree made it. Some of the youngest were gone. But the old guard, the apples and peaches that had weathered hail, drought, and grief, they came roaring back. Linda resigned, moved out of state. The new HOA president, Cheryl, showed up with the official apology and told me about the new ordinance, permanent protection for agricultural lots, passed by a landslide. I told her to hang the framed resolution in my barn, right over the tractor that once blocked the gate. Every Saturday, trucks rolled through again, but now the drivers waved instead of cursing. Kids rode the hay wagon. Ellie came home from college and picked apples with me, just like when she was little. Sometimes I still get letters from strangers, other landowners fighting their own battles. They ask how I beat the system. I tell them, plain as day, you don't beat the system. You remind it whose dirt it's standing on. At night, I walk the rows in the quiet, the orchard talking in its own language, leaves whispering, fruit thudding softly to the ground. I stop at the old cedar post where Mark carved our initials, run my thumb over the groove, press my forehead to the wood the way I used to press it to his chest when things got too hard. I whisper, I kept it, all of it, somewhere in the dark. An apple lets go and falls, thump, like the land answering back. Turns out widows aren't as fragile as committees think. Turns out dirt remembers who tended it. And a woman who's lost everything has nothing left to fear. Porch lights on. The gate is open, water's running, and for the first time in a long time, me and this land, we're both breathing, wide awake, and ready for whatever morning comes next. So, you tell me, when someone tries to take everything you've got left, do you let them? Or do you stand up and remind them who really owns the ground they're standing on? Drop your story below. Tell me where you stand on justice. And hey, if you've ever faced down a clipboard tyrant, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe. Leave your war stories in the comments. And remember, sometimes the sweetest harvest comes from just holding your ground.